We'll get started. And as always, we begin with a very hearty thanks to Linda and Ilan for hosting the Lunch and Learn and for really prompting us to do this consistently. It's always a lot of fun. It's always quite interesting. And regretfully, some of our regulars are away. David Silva, for example, is visiting his family in Toronto. Thank you very much.
No, it's okay, Leave it. Oh. Special blessing.
Yes.
All right. L'chaim.
L'chaim.
Here. I know you don't drink.
No, not for me.
You want some?
Crooked glass?
Huh?
No. Crooked glass.
Rabbi, is that appropriate to make a session in somebody who is very sick and
absolutely, it should be a schus for a refuah shlema.
And I'll tell you who it is. I may have
Okay.
told you. You know, last week, 3 days ago, there was an attack in the middle of the country by one Arab guy from Taibe. That's the Arab village, and he came to Kochav Yair, injured 2 guys, went on to Tzurigal, another issue that hit 2 more people, and then he came to my place, which is another one beside them, Tzur Natan it's called. He killed 1 individual, 55 years old, and the one that came to help him, who's in charge of the security there, is the son of my best friend that went to the army with me.
Ah, wow, yeah.
So last night they operated on him. They didn't wake him up, and so we need. Name is Ephraim ben Rivka.
Ephraim ben Rivka. Today's learning should be a schus that he should have a refuah shlema, and amongst the Shar Cholei Yisrael, and Eretz Yisrael should find Yeshua and safety and security for its citizens.
Amen.
And peace in Middle East. Again, Iran stopped the shooting. They said they called Trump. Please tell the Israel to stop.
We're not going to stop now.
And
at least that's what the story that Trump tells.
yeah. So,
All right, let's continue. Let's go. Okay, so the long-awaited delegation of the 12 spies who were sent to stake out the land of Canaan, they return, and they've been gone for 40 days. And the nation of Israel, they listen to their report, and with bated breath. And when the spies deliver their negative assessment, the apprehension that the Jewish people experience, oh, wow, welcome.
Sorry, I'm late. It was the last minute on the phone.
It happens to the best of us. Okay, so we're just getting started, and we have the spies that bring back a negative report, and the Jewish people despair. Their hope turns to tears. However, 2 men hold steadfast against the crowd. These are 2 lone figures who resist peer pressure and the jeers of the throngs of Jewish people. And who are these 2 individuals? Calev and Yehoshua. They insist that the land is exceedingly good. Calev and Yehoshua are heroic figures who take a principled stand, who remain loyal to Hashem and loyal to truth, even when all the odds are stacked against them.
Calev ben Ifuneh.
Yes, Haknizi. Right, yes. So who are these 2 men? We traditionally view them as the twosome, who are coordinated. But if we're going to take a very close look at the parsha, we're going to reveal that there's some very, very fascinating contrasts between them. And so we're going to engage in these 2 leaders of the Jewish people. And so we're going to begin our examination with the scene where the people are exposed to the findings of the spies. And we can imagine the anticipation and the nervousness that the nation sort of engenders when they listen to the report of Eretz Yisrael. So let's take a look at source number 1. What does it say? Vayisapru lo, vayomru ba'anu el haaretz. They told him, or they recounted to him, and they said, we have come to the land, asher shelachtanu, we come to the land that you've sent us. The gam zavaz chalav udvash, and it does in fact flow with milk and honey. V'zeh piria. And here's an example of some of its fruits. They brought back some fruit to show them just how incredibly fruitful the land of Israel was. Ephes ki az ha'am hayoshev ba'aretz. However, the land, the nation that dwells on the land, they're very mighty. Ha'arim b'tzuros. Their cities are protected with walls. The gam yilidei ha'anak ru'inu sham. We even saw some of the children of Anak, the giants. Amalek yoshev be'eretz hanegev. Amalek dwells in the south. V'achiti v'yivusi v'ha'emori yoshev bahar. The Hittite, the Yebusite, and the Amorite, they dwell by the highlands. V'aknani yoshev al hayam. The Canaanite dwells by the sea. Al yad hayardin, as well as by the shore, the side of by the banks of the Jordan. Vayahas Calev es ha'am, and Calev silenced the nation. Vayomer alo na'aleh, we can go up, we can go, and we can ascend. V'yorashno, so we can dispossess the land of Israel. Ki yochol nucholo, because we shall surely overcome it. So, if Calev had to quiet down the people, then it's apparent that the report caused a stir. And it's difficult to pinpoint the exact detail in particular that triggered the panic. Was it the lengthy list of enemies that are described as being inhabitants of the land? Was it possibly the name of Amalek that was invoked, who they had a history with, they had fought a battle against? Whichever way, the debriefing of the spies sends a shockwave through the crowd. And immediately Calev takes the podium and he says, we can do it. If we set forth immediately, we can overcome any obstacle in our path. Where is Yehoshua? If Yehoshua and Calev are both acting in concert together, encouraging the Jewish people, not taking part in the plan of the spies, why is Yehoshua not also participating at this juncture? Where does Yehoshua finally speak up? He speaks up in the following verses. Let's continue. So this is source number 2. Yehoshua bin Nun, the Calev ben Yefuneh, min hatorim es haaretz karu vigdehem. Yehoshua bin Nun and Calev ben Yefuneh, from the spies, they ripped their clothes. Vayomru al kol adas b'nei Yisrael limor, and they said to the entire assembly of the b'nei Yisrael, saying, Haaretz asher avarnu v'alasuro, so the land that we passed through to spy or to scout, Tova haaretz ma'od ma'od, the land is very, very good. Im chofetz banu Hashem v'hevio sanu al haaretz azos in asana lanu. If God desires us, He can bring us to this land and He can give it to us. Eretz asher hi zavas chalav v'dvash, a land that flows with milk and honey. Ach b'Hashem al timrodu, however, in God do not rebel. V'atam al tiru, and don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of the am haaretz. Don't be afraid of the nation, of the land. Kilachmenuhim, they're our bread. We can consume them. Sar tzila me'alehem, their protection has departed from them. Vashem itanu, and God is with us. God is with us. Therefore, al tira'um. Therefore, do not be afraid of them. So, in this case over here, right now, Yehoshua and Calev are acting in concert. And so the question is, why initially, when the panic first sets in, does Calev respond alone? Where is Yehoshua? Why does he remain silent in the shadows as an enigmatic character while the crisis gains momentum? Why doesn't he speak out initially? And why does he only speak out when things seem to have come to some kind of a head? Why does he seem to act independent from Calev? Was there something on his mind? Perhaps he doubted, he wasn't sure which path he was going to take. What exactly is going on with Yehoshua? Why is he not joining Calev initially when Calev stands and protests the spies and their negative report and the despair that the Jewish people take on? But a further question warrants our investigation. In anticipation of the spies' expedition, Moshe changes Yehoshua's name. Let's take a look at source number 3. What does it say? Eila shemos ha'anashim asher shalach Moshe l'asur ha'aretz. These are the names of the men that Moshe sent to scout out the land. Vayikra Moshe l'Hoshea bin Nun Yehoshua. And Moshe called Hoshea bin Nun Yehoshua. Why is Yehoshua singled out amongst the spies? What is Moshe doing when he changes Yehoshua's name? Rashi explains that it's kind of a tefillah. Let's take a look at the next source, which is source number 4. He's palil alav. Moshe prayed, Yoshiacha, may God save you, may atzas meraglim, from the counsel or from the evil schemes of the spies. All right, from the evil schemes of the spies. So, why does Moshe only bless Yehoshua? Why doesn't he pray for all the 12 spies? What exactly is going on over here? So we're going to take a look at the very next source over here, which is a Gemara from the Talmud in Masechah Sota. This is what it says. Vayalu b'negeb vayovo ad Chevron. It says they went up from the south, and he reached Chevron. So it's talking about the spies over here. And the grammatical tense shifts within the Hebrew. Vayalu means they went up, vayavo, and he came to Chevron, in the singular. Vayavo mi boile. Why does it not say in the plural, and they came to Chevron? Why does it say specifically here that he came to Chevron as opposed to they came to Chevron? So Omar Rava explained, Melamed Shapiresh Calev me'atzas meraglim. This comes to tell you that at this juncture, Calev separated himself from the schemes and the deceit planned by the meraglim. V'holach v'nishtateach al kivrei avos. He went to Hebron because who was buried in Hebron? Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Right, all three of our forefathers, are buried buried in Hebron. So he went to their graves and he prayed. Omar lahen avosai. He said to them, my ancestors, bikshu olai rachmim, pray and bestow, so that God should grant me mercy, and not sell me atzas meraglim, so that I should be saved from the schemes of the meraglim, of the spies. Yehoshua. What about Joshua? Why was Joshua not included? Why did he not go with him to pray in Hebron? Because Moshe already prayed for him. Vayikra Moshe Yehoshua ben Nun Yehoshua. Yoshiach miatzas meraglim. So the Gemara here is making a very insightful contrast between Calev and Yehoshua that's going to be critical in our analysis of Calev. Calev has a ruach acheres, it says over here. It's at the very, very end. I didn't read that in the Hebrew, but it's at the very, very end of that text, that Calev had a different spirit. He had his own will. He was independent-minded. And he possessed immense psychological strength that he was able to withstand the pressures of the group. He enters Hebron alone in order to pray at the graves of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and ask that Hashem grant him strength to retain his own perspective. He has an independent mind. And Calev...
So is that like a negative thing or not?
No. It's not a negative thing. It's just different. It's different than Yehoshua. We're going to explain. Calev receives his inspiration in Hebron from the Avos who are buried in Hebron. Calev prays for himself. And it's at this point that we understand a deep contrast between him and Yehoshua. How does he gain his fortitude in the face of evil spies? Calev goes and prays. Yehoshua is different, however. It's Moshe who prays for Yehoshua. Moshe is the source of Yehoshua's strength. Or as the Gemara puts it, he bestows God's protective blessings upon him. So let's focus for a moment on Yehoshua. Why does his name change? Why is it specifically at this juncture that the Torah stresses that Yehoshua's name was changed? Yehoshua is someone who's already familiar to us within the Torah. And our first glimpse of him is when Moshe picks him to lead the battle against Amalek. We next see him waiting at Har Sinai, waiting faithfully for 40 days by the foot of the mountain, all by himself, while the Bnei Yisrael, the Jewish people, are in the camp and ultimately worship the golden calf. Yehoshua is often described as never leaving the tent. Yehoshua is Moshe's apprentice, his partner, his assistant. He exhibits phenomenal loyalty and dedication to Moshe. We just read in last week's Parsha that when Eldad and Medad began prophesying, it was he who was zealous in protecting Moshe's honor. But it's not merely that Yehoshua is dedicated to Moshe. If Yehoshua functions as Moshe's personal helper and advisor, he's located at the epicenter of the government of the Jewish people. He knows all the leadership. He understands how to maneuver in the corridors of power, and knows how to work the political system of the Bnei Yisrael, rather. Yehoshua is an establishment figure. So when the Gemara contrasts Calev as praying for himself and Yehoshua being prayed for by Moshe, it gives us insight into the inner world of these two individuals. Calev is a loner. He's a man who stands apart. He holds his own ideas. Meanwhile, Yehoshua is a protege of Moshe. To the degree that Calev works outside the system, Yehoshua is the system. And let's look at Calev a little bit further. First of all, Calev is not being groomed for future leadership. We've never seen him really before this Torah within the Torah. He is beholden to no one, and therefore he can speak his mind freely. In Calev's lone visit to Hebron, he's depicted as separating himself from the group to visit the city, and he carves out his own path. What we know about Hebron is that Hebron was actually a very intimidating place. If you take a look, for example, at source number... Let's take a look at source number 11. It says, V'yalu v'negev v'yovo ad Hebron. The spies went up from the south, and they arrived at Hebron. V'sham, what went on at Hebron? Well, there they encountered three individuals: Achiman, Sheshai, and Talmai. Yelidei ha'anak. These are the giants that they encountered. The Meraglim quivered in fear. They trembled. They hid behind trees and rocks, and were accused of being grasshoppers, and they even felt like grasshoppers. They were incredibly scared of these three individuals. These are the people who they spooked the Jewish people by saying, we even found the Bnei Ha'anak present there in the land of Israel. We can't possibly conquer the place. And just a second, let me get to the point. And who goes to Hebron all by himself? Calev. That tells you that he's very, very independent. He's very, very strong. He's very, very driven. He's beholden to no one, and he acts as an independent actor. And we see this even further. How do we know, for example, that it was specifically Calev that entered Hebron by himself? We know that somebody entered Hebron by himself because we use the singular. Let's take a look at what goes on later on in the book of Joshua. And we're just going to read through this in the English. So, actually, we're going to go first. We're going to take a look at We're going to take a look at the very, very top of page 5, where we read about. It says that here, Zulati Calev ben Yefuneh, the only person who will enter the land of Israel from the people in the desert is Calev ben Yefuneh, who yir'ena v'lo etein es haaretz. He will see it. To him I will give the land, asher dorach ba, because the land upon which his foot tread. It's the place where he walked. And we find that language again. So that language is being used with regards to Calev. We find that language is again used in the book of Joshua. Let's take a look. The Judites approached Yehoshua at Gilgal, and Calev, the son of Yefuneh, the Kenizzite, said to him, "You know what instructions the Lord gave at Kadesh Barnea to Moshe, the man of God, concerning you and me. I was 40 years old when Moshe, the servant of the Lord, sent me from Kadesh Barnea to spy out the land, and I gave him a forthright report. While my companions who went up with me took the heart out of the people, I was loyal to the Lord my God. On that day, Moses promised on oath, the land which your foot trod shall be a portion for you and your descendants forever." So you see that the language is being used again. Calev is the one who's talking about having a place where his foot tread. And where does he go? What does he do? What does he do with this? He actually leads the tribe of Yehuda in conquering the land of Hebron. And you see that at the very, very end of that section, where it says, Vayivarechehu Yehoshua. Yehoshua blessed him. Vayitein es Chevron lekalev ben Yefuneh lenachala, and he assigned Chevron to him as his portion. The land that Calev walked upon is Chevron in particular, and it's not a coincidence. Calev is the representative of the tribe of Yehuda, and Chevron became the capital of that tribal section, the section of Yehuda. So Calev is depicted as a driven individual. He's a man with a mission. He, in our case over here, in the story of Yehoshua, he approaches Yehoshua, demanding his personal territory before any tribe has made its move to their designated territory. And the reader senses in Calev an excitement and a drive to capture the land. He's bursting with energy. He's 85 years old at this point, and he describes himself as having the same vigor and same enthusiasm that he had when he was 40 years old. He's retained that passion for 40 years. He was 40 years old when he was a spy in the land of Israel. Calev is not someone who waits for orders. We see that he's taking the initiative and he's jumping, he's going, and he's leading the Jewish people into battle, and he ultimately is successful. He conquers the city of Hebron 40 years after the story of the Meraglim. He acts independently outside of the system. Later, in his role as an elder statesman of Yehuda, he freely distributes incentives in order to garner the enthusiasm of his tribe. And you read about this. He says, anyone who conquers the city of Kiryas Sefer will marry my daughter Achsa. We see that he acts precipitously, he acts independently, he acts boldly, and he doesn't wait for anyone, and he does what he feels he needs to do. So we have an idea now about these two individuals. We have Yehoshua and Calev. Calev acts outside of the system. He's an independent. He's a rugged individualist. Meanwhile, Yehoshua is essentially a representative of the entrenched power structure. So let's return to the scene in which we hear the people hear the spies' report. Calev, they begin to panic, and Calev steps forward. But at that point, Yehoshua remains silent. Calev was not afraid of confrontation. Calev heard the tone, and he sensed the worry, and he immediately acts and reassures and encourages the people by saying, we will surely overcome it, we will surely possess the land. He expresses a conviction that he has, an attitude. After all, Calev was very, very eager to conquer the land. Why might Yehoshua have stayed quiet at that very first moment? After all, we know that at the story's end, Yehoshua does not share the perspective of the spies. So what exactly was he thinking? We're going to give two possible answers. Why Yehoshua does not join Calev initially. The first one is that he was a student of Moshe. Yehoshua heard the report of the spies, but he didn't feel it was his place to respond. Why? Because he was standing in front of his mentor, he was standing in front of Moshe, the leader of the nation. Yehoshua was sure that Moshe would find a way in which to bring the situation under control and to calm the circumstances. It wasn't his job to confront the spies, that was Moshe's job. And Moshe was present, Moshe is there. In general, we say that there are rules of protocol about how students behave in the presence of their teacher. You never speak in front or in place of your teacher while your teacher is present. If your teacher is in a position of authority, you don't take any authority for yourself. Sort of rules of Jewish protocol, and this and this explains why the moment that we can understand why Yehoshua joins Calev later on. In his mind, it was Moshe's job to respond. But what do we read? Let's take a look at source number 15. Let's appoint a new leader, and we'll go back to Egypt. Moshe and Aaron fell on their faces. Where does he stand up and start and voices protest against the what is being said by the people that we should return to Egypt? It's when he sees Moshe give up. He was not going to take the role and the authority of leadership while Moshe was present and while Moshe still held the reins. But when Moshe lets go of those reins by despairing, by giving up, as we see here, it's at that point that Yehoshua then steps up. He says, "Okay, if Moshe is going to relax his hold on the reins, then I have to stand up and I have to do something." Moshe gives up hope, and now that Yehoshua sees his master in a state of helplessness, he takes his turn directly in confronting the people, and that's our first answer. So we know that Calev and Yehoshua operate on different models. Yehoshua is an establishment figure. Calev acts outside the system. Calev is not afraid to go head to head and be confrontational when the people start doing their thing and giving voice to a desire to return and go back to Egypt. Calev immediately and precipitously stands up and protests against that idea and that state of mind. Yehoshua, as an establishment figure, waits for Moshe to intervene. When he sees that Moshe doesn't intervene, then he steps up and joins Calev in confronting the people of Israel. But we're going to take a different explanation as to what exactly...
Confronting comes from the word Vekaru Bigdem.
Well, no, that's the next line is that Vayomru El Ha'am. I didn't include it. But immediately afterwards, and they said, Vayomru El Ha'am El B'nai Yisrael. And then they said, we can surely, Alon Na'aleh, we can go up, we can take it.
Yeah.
All right. The second opinion, it comes from Rabbi Jacob-Mikveh, the Rosh Yeshiva of Yeshivas Har Etzion. Rabbi Midan depicts Yehoshua as a political realist. He's unable to sway the minds of the spies during the mission, so therefore he opted to remain silent. He assumed and hoped that on his return to the camp, Moshe would succeed through political manipulation and leadership skill to minimize the damage of the spies. And he believed that the mission of entering the land of Israel could be salvaged. It could be salvaged. But let's take a look at what Rabbi Midan writes. He says, at the very moment...
Is it? Which one?
That's number 16.
Page 6.
At that very moment in which he strode proud and upright towards the fortifications of Hebron, this is talking about Calev, he glanced forward, his faith strengthened him. As Calev's eyes burned with the divine fire of the mission, Yehoshua read the faces of his co-delegates and saw their moods. We felt like grasshoppers in their eyes, they reported. Yehoshua understood that any individual, however brave or courageous, would not have the power to overwhelm a nation whose leaders were those 10 spies. He had seen the heavy fortifications, the giants of Canaan. Yehoshua concluded that a nation whose leaders saw themselves as helpless as grasshoppers were simply unable to face the military challenge that they faced. He preferred to remain amongst the 10 spies and not enter Hebron. Maybe he even debated with the spies and tried to convince them of a different view. But when he failed to convince them, he saw no advantage in breaking off all connection with them. For the same reason, he did not confront or contradict them as they reported back to the Bnei Yisrael regarding the strength of the enemy and the fortified cities. His faith in God and his love of the land did not affect his understanding of the lack of confidence, the low spirit of the nation, a mood amongst the rank and file that had been engendered by these leaders. Yehoshua knew, with that national mindset, even of the pillar of fire and the pillar of cloud would be unable to push the nation to its goal. Maybe Yehoshua hoped that time would pass and the people would calm down and that fear would subside and everything would resume its proper course. But suddenly, overnight, Yehoshua changed his mind. He shifted his strategy and moved from his position amongst the people to the role of opposition, of he who stood alone against the nation. At a certain point in this story, Yehoshua abandons his political neutrality. Rav Midan poses the question, what made Yehoshua change his strategy? What made him confront the people? At what point did he decide to speak out? Where was it? Let's take a look again at that source we just read before. What do they say? V'nitnu rosh v'noshuva mitzrayma. When they said, let's appoint a leader and return to Egypt. So I think this is the answer. This is the critical line that changed Yehoshua, because this is the line that immediately precedes Yehoshua intervening. What's the significance of a return to Egypt? It's a reversal of the entire Jewish enterprise. It's a reversal of the promises made to Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, that they would receive the Torah, they would have mitzvos, and that they would live in the land of Israel, and they would live a life of chosenness. When they said, we are returning to Egypt, they're rejecting the special role of the Jewish people. Not only that, they're also rejecting God. How does God introduce himself at the very beginning of the Ten Commandments? Does anybody recall? God says, I am the God who? Asher ho. It's Mitzrayim. Right. I am the God who took you out of Egypt. You reject Israel, you're also rejecting God.
Right.
You want to go back to Egypt? You want to give up on a Jewish future. You want to assimilate and disappear and be no different than anyone else. And that's just not something that Yehoshua could swallow. So it's at this point that Yehoshua intervenes. We've depicted Yehoshua as someone who's measured, he's calculating. He understands the political process and national management. At the initial level, Yehoshua assessed the likelihood of a successful intervention as being very low. He probably thought that the damage that the spies perpetrated could be contained. However, when Yehoshua understood that the episode of the spies had escalated to a very serious level, he felt the imperative to stand up and confront them. Why? Because there was a very attack now on the essence of what it meant to be the Bnei Yisrael. And this was a moment when you cannot stand on the sidelines. One had to take a stand. One had to make a statement. Either one is with God or one sides with the rebels. Either one accepts that our journey is to Eretz Yisrael and enjoy a unique quality as Am Yisrael, or one acquiesces to the wish to return to Egypt and slavery and the disappearance of the Jewish nation. And when it comes to this, Yehoshua knows exactly on whose side he is. Yehoshua is a realist. He knows that the spies were dangerous, but he also knew that as a lone figure he could not stand against them and have any effect. Yehoshua is a politician. He knows when he's lost the battle. He'll have to fight for Eretz Yisrael some other way on some other day. But Yehoshua, at the same time as being a realist, is also a man of principle. When Judaism, the identity of the Jewish people, is under attack, when a very raison d'etre is in question, Yehoshua stands against the people, declaring the truth because it is the truth, even if it will have no effect whatsoever. Like many prophets who followed him, some unpopular things need to be said because simply they're God's words, even if people don't listen. And it's at this point that Yehoshua looks the people in the eye and states loud and clear that we will go up, we will go to the land, and if you fail to do so, you will bring disaster on us, which is exactly what happened. So, in conclusion, we've addressed the question as to why Calev and Yehoshua don't seem to be acting together. They seem to be acting towards the same end, but not necessarily in concert. Calev acts alone, and Yehoshua seems to sort of mingle with the crowd. We explain this because Calev is very independent, very outspoken, while Yehoshua is an establishment figure. Ultimately, Yehoshua joins Calev when he realizes that I can't succeed, and now it's a matter of principle. Even though I know that I will not be able to convince the nation, I will not be able to remedy this circumstance. I can't fix the problem. I cannot go down in history as being someone who was silent at a time when the Jewish raison d'etre is now being questioned and the Jewish future is now being undermined. So Yehoshua stands up and joins Calev at this juncture because while he might be a politician, he might be an establishment figure, he knows how to work and manipulate and pull the levers of authority and power to get the desired outcome. When it comes down to it, you still have to act with principle. And here, that is exactly what Yehoshua is doing. And that concludes